Favorite real estate agent from Las Vegas, Robert Steim, Steim Realty Network, Keller Williams, The Marketplace. Hey, I was actually just working on a property that we're going to be listing and wanted to share how that looks because one of the questions I get all the time is, you know, how are we going to price the property, or what strategies do you use to price the property? And then most people that you go and meet with, they've seen a number or they have a number in their head. And a lot of times they get that number from Zillow, a different website, or they just come up with the number one way or the other. So anyways, I wanted to kind of share with you some of the things that I do and what to expect from me if I come and talk to you about your property. And, you know, I'm pretty flexible, but you want to use important data, understand where you're coming from, understand where the market's at right now, how the buyers might perceive things. So I wanted to get into that just a little bit here. So I'm going to provide all my information here up front. If you want to get in touch with me about anything specific and discuss things further, you can reach me by my cell phone there or my email address, or drop a comment if you'd like. But let's get into this. So pricing your property correctly. Are Zillow's estimates accurate? So yeah, you can let me know what you think in the comments, but I will say that sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's way off. And basically what we have it with these Zillow type estimates are, we have a computer that's got, you know, logarithms and everything else that's in there to try to figure out what a price of a property is, with very limited information about the property itself, but also just kind of throwing some houses in the area together, trying to crunch some numbers and seeing what it spits out. So let's take a look at what that looks like sometimes. So on this particular property I'm looking at, I'm going to withhold the address and all that stuff just because we're not ready yet. But the Zillow's estimate on this property is showing $412,000. Again, we don't know if that's right or not. It's just the first thing I see when I look on Zillow. It's the first time our clients see before they meet with us. I know a lot of people just kind of keep tabs on that. And I think most people know it's not 100% accurate, but sometimes like to think it's at least close. So in this particular case, we're working with 412. Now, there's more than one website that does this. So for example purposes, I do like to pull those up also, and I present these to the seller. So Redfin has this exact same property at $392,638. So they're very specific, $638. But we can see right here, it's a $20,000 difference. 20,000 of 400,000. I mean, that's a 5% difference. That's a pretty big deal. I would like to know a little bit more and see which side of that range we should be on. And then if we look at Realtor.com, they actually have the same exact home priced for $439, or valued at $439,400. So we look at the high side and the low side. We've got $439 on one side. Let's call it $392 on the other side. So what is that? $39,000 plus $8, $47,000 difference. I mean, that's a big deal for a lot of people. I don't want to be $47,000 off when I make a decision. And yeah, so it's not uncommon for a seller to have a misconception of what their home is worth. The data out there is like hit or miss. But after evaluating the property and the neighborhood and what's been up for sale recently and the condition of the property, we've pretty much come to the decision that we're going to list the property at $425,000. So you take all those numbers into consideration, we're in the ballpark. I mean, they weren't too far off, but I guess when you're making major life decisions and your biggest financial decision is usually buying and selling real estate properties, I guess I would like to feel like I was about right on the price and not leave it up to random computers calculating things. So, and again, if you guys watch my other videos, you know me, I like to be transparent and I like to share why I think certain prices are suggested and what ranges I think we can play in. And a lot of that depends on some stuff, but what do we consider when we go over this information with sellers? The first thing I look at is what properties are currently on the market. So we're looking for properties that are similar in size. We're looking at similar features, similar neighborhood. We might look in the same subdivision that share community parks, that share a community gate. We might look at a 1 mile radius if if all the neighborhoods nearby are similar. We try to look at the square footage of the home and factor in, you know, plus or minus a certain percentage, just depending on what kind of comps we're seeing. So comps being comparable homes that we would use as reference. If it's a 2-story home, generally like to look at other 2 stories. 1-story homes, look at other 1 stories. And if there's pools, we can put that into the mix, all that sort of thing. So we just want to see what's currently on the market, because honestly, that's what our competition is. We're going to be trying to sell our property against these other properties. So how do we compare? If we have a certain number in our mind, Zillow tells us a number, all these other things tell us a number. As a real estate agent, I might tell you a number, but then we look at the competition and we find out there's 10 similar homes that are all priced less than ours. That's going to be an obstacle we have to overcome. So we do have to factor that in. So that's why I think this is maybe the most important thing we look at, is what are we currently up against and how do we compare? The other thing I look at is what properties are currently under contract. So these are a little bit tricky because we don't know. We know what they were listed for. We know that they found a buyer, but we don't know what the final terms are and what the actual closing dollar amount is going to be. So this one I look at for a couple reasons. I want to find out, why were they successful? So how many days were they on the market? What kind of buyer did they attract? That might be a cash buyer, a VA veteran buyer. It could be a FHA buyer, conventional. There might be some clues there, how fast it happened. And, you know, we can usually guess that it's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of what they're asking for, but we don't know that exactly until it becomes official. That's private information. And then how often did they receive and accept an offer? So if we're seeing that everything that goes on the market is getting an offer and accepting within 2, 3, 4 days, then we know that neighborhood's moving quickly, and we might adjust our pricing accordingly. If we see that they're on the market 60, 90, 120 days, and we also want to keep that in mind, so we set proper expectations and maybe factor that into our pricing strategy too. And then what appraisers are going to look at most, and what we should also keep in mind, is what properties officially sold recently. So this means there was a seller, there's a buyer, they agreed on a price. Now that information's public, we can see exactly what they paid. We can see if they gave any concessions as far as help towards closing costs or stuff like that. That should be factored in. And then that tells us really what the market is deciding is a fair price. And from an appraiser standpoint, so when the lenders send out an appraiser if there's a loan involved, the lender is going to send out an appraiser to value the property and make sure that the bank is lending the appropriate amount of money. They're not going to give you $500,000 loan to purchase a property that they feel like is worth $400,000. They want to make sure those numbers align. So when we're buying and selling properties, we have to keep that in mind too, because if there is a loan involved, we have to look at it from an appraiser's point of view also. Are they going to be able to justify the price that we're selling it for? So if we think our house is the absolute best in the neighborhood and no other house has these features, and that makes our house worth $100,000 more than everything else, then we have to at least acknowledge the appraiser may or may not think that. So we have to plan ahead as far as how are we going to deal with any gaps between what the appraiser says and what a buyer is willing to pay, what the seller wants to sell it for. So these are ways we can kind of look into the future and say, okay, here's a few speed bumps that we might run into, and maybe we have those conversations up front so there's no surprises and we can strategize accordingly. So so again, what officially sold? What was the final sales price? Any concessions? What type of sale was it? How does the property compare? So most of the time we can look at pictures and say, hey, this one was totally remodeled. Your property hasn't been updated since 1990, so they're not quite the same. This one added a patio cover, a balcony, a barbecue, a pool, and a hot tub, and all those sort of things. Yours didn't. So these are ways we can adjust the price up or down accordingly. We might find out your house is better than everybody else's, and then we got to figure out how we're going to maximize value there. Or we also want to factor in any key features. If your property has a great view of the mountains, or here in Las Vegas, if you got a view of the Strip, or if you are a larger lot than other ones and you're next to a park, that might be worth something to some people. A corner lot, a cul-de-sac. We're kind of looking for those unique features that we can factor into the pricing as well. So the other thing that goes into pricing the home is, what are the seller's goals? That's kind of a big factor because every situation is different. So we want to find out, as far as the seller goes, what's your motivation and what are your future plans? Do we have a hard deadline as far as, I've got a job transfer, I've got to be on the East Coast 2 months from now, we have to get it sold, this is what we have to do? Or are we in a situation where we're like, yeah, if we got the right price, we would move? But those are two totally different motivations. So we want to know that sort of stuff, and that's going to play into what our strategy is. And then we want to look at the speed of the sale versus getting top dollar. So you're going to have some people, kind of the same thing as the motivation, but if I need to sell it today, that might affect our pricing. We might price it more aggressively to get more buyers in faster and get an offer accepted. If we're trying to squeeze every penny out, we have a unique property with unique features and we're okay with waiting for that one person who's willing to pay a little bit more for it, then we might price a little bit higher and just take a little bit more aggressive approach in terms of asking for more money. So speed versus getting top dollar, sometimes those aren't in alignment, and it's good to know what's most important. And again, if we're looking at like the financial focus of things versus convenience. So there are times when you're in negotiations where somebody just wants the most money no matter what. And they'll be very flexible on their end in terms of how fast they move out. Other terms that they might be flexible on, they just want the most money possible. There's other times where, you know, maybe someone's having a home built from scratch and it's going to be done in 4 months. And for them, taking a little bit less dollar amount with some flexibility from the buyer, letting the seller stay there for a little bit longer while their house is being built, that might be worth something to them. So not money, but the time and convenience might be worth something. So these are why getting to know the seller's situation and finding out what's most important to them. Would you rather have this or would you rather have this? And then that all plays into our pricing strategy. And then flexibility versus firm terms. So there's times where you meet with somebody and they're like, absolutely, I'm taking my ceiling fans, I'm taking my security system, I'm taking my water softener, I'm taking my washer, dryer, refrigerator, and no questions asked. That's what it's going to be. Now, from a buyer standpoint, they might need those things also, but the seller won't bend. And that's going to run off some buyers who also want those things. And that might also be a sign of a difficult seller. So a buyer might say, hey, you know what, I'm going to have to work with the seller for the next 30, 45 days. Do I really want to work with somebody who's kind of nitpicking and taking everything on the house? But also on the flip side, sometimes the seller just really, really needs those things, and that is what it is. So we deal with all different situations and all different perspectives. So we have to just keep that in mind. And being more flexible is usually more universally appealing and gets a little bit more activity, but being firm with our terms is an option as well. And sometimes it's best to make that information available up front and clear. That might scare away some buyers because they don't want to deal with certain things. However, the ones that do read that information or become aware of that situation and still make offers, they're generally fine with them. And then accessibility versus comfort and privacy. So when it comes to showing the property, there's it's not fun. Sometimes you get real estate agents who have a person in their car, a buyer in their car. They're looking on their phone and say, hey, I just found this one and it's right there. Can we go see it? But it's occupied by the owner. So in that case, the agent calls and says, hey, we're in the neighborhood. Can we see it? Well, the seller might not be thrilled about having to up and leave or, clean up the house really quick. But those are situations where we want to be accommodating as a seller. And the more available and accessible the home is. So if it's vacant, obviously that's great because they can come and go pretty much anytime they want. It's not really an inconvenience for people for them to stop by on short notice. However, there's circumstances where, hey, we've got, 12 dogs and, 2 babies and we need a little bit of time to prepare if somebody's going to pop in on us. and that's totally understandable also. So we kind of try to find that right balance between making sure that we're accessible to buyers and agents that want to see the property, but also a certain level of comfort and privacy, just depending on the situation. So generally speaking, the more accessible we are, the more showings we get, the more offers we can get, and usually the faster it can sell. So those are other things that we talk about and factor into the pricing strategy. And then cooperative versus combative. Everybody's personality is different, and that's totally fine. So there's some agents who like to kind of rock the boat a little bit and are a little bit combative. There's other agents who are very easygoing and try to create win-win situations and make it all happy and friendly all the time. So we sometimes have to wait and see what kind of people we're dealing with, but the seller, it's their house and they might have a certain style and they might be looking for an agent that fits their needs or helps offset what their personality is. So it just really kind of depends on what kind of style that you're looking for and how you want your agent to act in that particular case and who's the right fit for you. And then how does that factor into your pricing strategy? And then, so with us over at Steim Realty Network and Keller Williams and myself, I'll speak for myself in that Keller Williams has a bunch of different agents, so they could have their own styles, but I very firmly believe in customized game plans and getting customized results. I don't feel like there's a one-size-fits-all solution for people. We're just dealing with too many different people, too many different personalities, too many different styles, too many different properties. You just talk about the different situations, whether it's a marriage, a divorce, death in the family, job relocation, family emergencies. There's all these different reasons people buy and sell homes. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're not so happy. But when it comes down to it, that all needs to be factored in. So I don't feel like there's a one size fits all. There's different comfort levels as far as the ways people market and accessibility to the home and what their goals are financially. So we really just have to put all that stuff together, kind of come up with a game plan. I mean, there's kind of basic stuff that we do in general, but that's mostly across the board, but you have to have flexibility in this business. So I just feel like that's our style in terms of meeting with people, really getting to know your situation and helping you craft a game plan that fits you. And there's other agents that'll just kind of have, this is what we do, and very systematic, and that might be right for some people also. But if this sounds like an approach that you would be happy with, then once again, I'll share my information right there. I'd love to help you. I'd love to have consultations or advise, whether it's listing the house tomorrow or thinking about moving or selling in a couple years. It's never really too early to start game planning. So feel free to call me. I'd appreciate it if you continue to watch and like and subscribe to my videos. I really appreciate that. And we'll keep coming up with new content that I think will be helpful for you. And if there's anything you would like to see or topics, go ahead and drop those in comments and I will read those and craft something useful. So I appreciate your time and I'll talk to you soon.